Hey Cloud Gamers, today we're having a look at No Man's Sky across the next gen update from the Xbox Series X, as well as two cloud gaming rigs here. We've got the maximum settings 2080, and thanks to maximum settings you can grab yourself a Steam key version of No Man's Sky if you check out the giveaways channel on our Discord. And we're also looking at the GeForce NOW version on the Shield TV Pro, which is AI upscaling the 1080 version up to 4K. If you absolutely love cloud gaming, you can join our channel, which really helps us out. Otherwise, just subscribing for the latest across all cloud gaming platforms is a great way to keep up to date. As we start here, then we're going to have a bit of a blind test to see if you can tell the difference between the maximum settings Series X and the GeForce NOW versions. Then we'll bring in the names so that you can have a look at a bit of a closer comparison, and then each one of the gameplays. Because of the procedural generation of No Man's Sky, it is very difficult to get all of the conditions right here, so although all three of these are on a toxicity planet, you can see that the terrain is quite different across all three, but you still get a good feeling of the quality and the movement as we go around. And as we bring in the names here, you can see that maximum settings on Shield TV is on the left, the Xbox Series X is in the middle, and the GeForce NOW with the AI upscaling is on the right. So as we come to the first freeze frame, then we can see that the maximum settings PC version on high is looking extremely crisp here. The Xbox Series X version is looking just as nice on the quality, but a little bit washed out. If we did have HDR mode on, it's way over the top in this game, which is why I've turned it off for this comparison. And the GeForce NOW version, looking at the dial, you can see the sharpening effects of the AI upscaling, but overall it is looking very good. Again, running on the high settings here. Xbox Series X is just running at the settings that it gives us here, although with HDR off it does still look extremely good, and it does look like Series X and GeForce NOW are holding 60 frames per second most of the time, with maximum settings giving a few dips here and there. As we go to some maximum settings only play then, so this is the PC version running on a maximum settings 2080 Super Rig. You can see the frames per second are dipping down into the 40s and 50s at points here, but generally it does hold around 60 frames per second. But quality at 4K is absolutely stunning. We can see a little bit of ground pop in as we move around here, but that is apparent on all of the platforms, as you'll see as we go through. But with the procedurally generated worlds and the quality of all the graphics here in No Man's Sky, this is a truly impressive game, and at 4K does look absolutely fantastic. So we see these night scenes here, the light effect from the torch on the front of the gear lights up the world around beautifully, and the dynamic effects from the other lights around as well really does make the graphics pop in this game. Obviously there is a lot of scanning in this game, which gives you some credits and also identifies things moving forwards. Definitely worth doing, although it can become a little bit laborious sometimes. You can see moving around even in the scanner there at night, it's only holding around the 50 frames per second mark. But because you're not doing a lot of movement in this game a lot of the time, it's barely noticeable that you're not getting that 60 frames per second, and the graphics quality here is looking stunning. Pushing it up to Ultra does pull those frames per second down to 30 and sub 30 on occasion, so I just don't think it's worth it. High looks good enough here. As we move over to the Series X coming into land here, we see that we are getting a very steady 60 frames per second or above here. But as we come out of the ship, you see that grass popping in. And we see a lot more of that graphics pop in as well on the Series X. I think the settings are set slightly lower, but the next gen update here does look absolutely phenomenal. Unfortunately, as I stated earlier, the HDR mode does look massively over the top in this game. I did have to turn it off because it just looked too kidified really. But overall, moving around, it does look absolutely fantastic. And as we come into doing some of the mining of the copper, you'll see the graphics again of the night mode and the kind of shine on the materials is absolutely fantastic. Moving around on the Series X version is just so smooth though, it is definitely pushing above 60 frames per second. and the next gen update has definitely helped that along. You can see moving around here, mining the copper. You can see those lighting effects absolutely superbly, and again no drop in frames per second here, especially as we were running around. But when we go into the menus, it does look a little bit lacking. As we move over to the GeForce NOW version, finally then, which is a 1080p version running on the high settings using the AI upscaling of the Shield TV Pro. For the most part you don't really notice, but when you start looking at some of the finer details, like on the back of the suit here, you do see some of those sharpening effects and around the text there on the vehicle. Again, we see a little bit of that graphics pop in on the ground as we're moving around, but generally you don't see that sharpening too much. So the AI upscaling doing a good job here. Again, looking at these thumbnails, you notice that sharpening effect a little bit more, but the environment and everything else around you looks like it would be native. Again, we see a bit of that graphics pop in as we're moving around, but that does seem to be consistent across the board here with the No Man's Sky. As we look out over the environment here, then we can see those AI upscaling effects slightly more, but it does look extremely good, but not quite as crisp as the PC version at full 4K or the Series X. However, once we're up close looking at the shine here of the copper, it does look as good as the Series X version up close. It's just if you look at the finer details and go a bit further out that it does seem to be slightly worse on GeForce NOW. However, with it being in the cloud and being highly portable on mobile, you would definitely not notice any of those differences and would be a marked improvement over the xCloud version. As we come back side by side then, we can see those menus are looking markedly better on the PC version over the other two. Although a lot of this is down to the environmental factors and positioning. As we see when the lights come on, we are seeing very consistent views across the board here. Overall, I'm really impressed with No Man's Sky, and the next generation update on the Series X is definitely a big step in the right direction. However, if you are going to be playing this on one of the cloud gaming platforms, you definitely have a good choice here between GeForce NOW and things like Shadow or maximum settings. However, if you do want to play at 4K, then GeForce NOW with the Shield TV is probably going to be your best option, unless you can get a maximum settings rig. And if you're extremely lucky, maybe you could get a Shadow Infinite or Ultra rig, but for me in the UK, they are currently non-existent. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest across all cloud gaming platforms. And if there is a platform or service that you think that we should cover, or a game that you think we have missed, let us know in the comments below and we will do our best to cover it in future.